You don't expect a frozen body to scream. That's the whole point of freezing them. But at 2:13 a.m., somewhere between a caffeine crash and another hour lost to cataloging redundant system logs, I heard something I couldn't explain. It started as a soft scrape, not mechanical, not electronic, something organic. Scritch, like fingernails on frosted glass. The noise came from Pod A113, one of 6 cryo wings buried beneath nearly a mile of reinforced concrete, steel, and Arctic permafrost. I was alone, had been for 68 days, not counting the dead. My name is Carter. I work for Eternal Life Preservation Services, which is the kind of company that charges the rich to die on their terms, or more accurately, to delay the inevitable until medicine catches up with their hubris. They freeze themselves in liquid nitrogen baths, file away a digital copy of their minds, and hope some future generation finds them interesting enough to thaw out. Think of it like long-term storage for the soul. Every 6 months, someone is sent here to watch the freezers. I was that someone. The station is called Cold Water, buried deep beneath the polar ice shelf, 3 hours from any satellite uplink, and 2 days from the nearest emergency transport. A marvel of modern preservation science, Cold Water houses 312 high-value clients and another 11 classified entities whose records have been redacted beyond my clearance. Each pod is its own coffin, steel-reinforced composite glass, complete with life suspension chambers, biogel injectors, and interior black box monitors. The facility is climate-sealed and nearly silent. No wind, no birds, no ticking clocks, just you, the hum of the containment coils, and the ever-present drip of condensation in the distance. It was supposed to be a quiet shift. Just routine maintenance, minor diagnostics, and making sure no frost built up where it shouldn't. But then came the scritch. I froze, not metaphorically. I literally stopped breathing. My hands hovered over the keyboard, cursor blinking on screen. Then came a second sound, a hitch in the air, a catch in the wall's breath, the subtle inhale of something that had lungs and used them. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up before my brain had even caught up. I reached for the audio intercom, flicked through the security feeds, tapped into the pod chamber mics. Nothing, no motion, no audio anomalies, just cold silence and that pale blue glow from the cryo tubes. I told myself I imagined it. Isolation plays tricks, sleep deprivation's worse, and the caffeine pills I'd been chewing like breath mints weren't exactly helping. But then the pod log chimed. Alert. Manual override attempt. Pod A113. My stomach tightened. A113? There was no A113. I'd memorized the pod grid weeks ago. They were numbered chronologically, and every filled cryo tube had a name, an ID number, medical history, biometric readouts, even a family legacy file for insurance purposes. A 113 didn't exist, not on my database. I pulled up the backup system. Nothing. Opened the manifest logbook, the physical one they told me, only to use in emergencies like it was some holy text. I flipped page after page. A 113 wasn't listed. It skipped from A112 straight to A114, like someone had quietly excised the name from history. But there was a pod in that spot. I left the control center, descended the main corridor into Pod Bay 3. The air changed the second I opened the bay door. You learn to feel temperature fluctuations when you've worked cryo as long as I have. The difference between -180 and -160 is subtle, but it's there. Tonight it was off by 5 degrees. That shouldn't have been possible. The lights were dimmed to nighttime setting, a soft indigo hue across rows of glass chambers. My boots echoed against the epoxy floor, sending shallow reverbs off the metal walls. The hum of the cryo units filled the space like a whisper in your ear, never quite clear enough to focus on, but too loud to ignore. I walked the row, past A108, A109, A110, stopped in front of A113. The pod was frosted, more than it should have been. Ice crystals had formed thick over the glass, obscuring most of what was inside. The control panel glowed red, not flashing, just glowing, as if it had been waiting for someone to notice. My gloved hand brushed against the glass, clearing a patch. There was someone inside. I stared. The face was turned away, pressed against the inner wall, skin pallid, nearly gray, veins black against the pale flesh, hair matted. The interior camera was broken, so I couldn't run a scan. But the frost, it wasn't just on the glass. It was on the inside. That's when I saw the scratch marks. Fingernails, dragged in slow, curved lines, some shallow, some deep, all recent. I backed away, hand hovering over my belt where I carried the emergency stim injector, good for heart restarts or psychotic breaks. I keyed into my wrist tablet and tried to manually override the pod's systems. Access denied. Administrative override required. I entered my codes, all of them, even the old ones I wasn't supposed to use anymore. No change. I looked up again. The figure in the pod had moved. Its face was pressed flush to the glass, eye wide open, blood red, watching me. And then it screamed. No sound escaped the pod, but I heard it, not through the air, through the walls, through the metal, through the pressure in my skull, through some other place I don't have words for, a howling that rattled my teeth and made something behind my eyes twitch. I stumbled back. My mouth was dry. My nose started bleeding. The scream ended, and the eye shut. I don't know how long I stood there. Could have been seconds. Could have been minutes. The only sound afterward was the low click, click, click of the pod's temperature stabilizers cycling on again. I returned to the command center, hand shaking as I reactivated the surveillance feeds. A113 looked perfectly normal now. No frost, no figure, no red light, as if the entire thing had reset itself, as if nothing had ever happened. But it had, because on my desk, placed neatly where I had left no papers, was a single line written on aged, yellowed notepaper, a note I never saw anyone leave. Scrawled in what looked like red ink, or something darker, were 5 words. Do not open A113. I didn't sleep that night, not a second. Instead, I sat in the command chair, eyes locked on the monitors, watching Pod A113, waiting. I don't know what I expected. Maybe for the glass to crack, or the red light to flicker again, or that impossible face to reappear behind the condensation, but the feed showed nothing. The camera angle was frozen at the perfect angle to suggest normalcy, still, undisturbed, and I hated it. At 4:56 a.m., I ran a full diagnostic sweep of the cryo wing. No anomalies detected. Pod A113 not found. That last part stopped me. Not offline, not locked, just not found. But I'd seen it. I'd touched the damn glass. I rerouted through maintenance access and tried a physical trace through the central wiring system. Every pod is connected to the cryocore. That's standard protocol, even for off-grid or redacted files. But A113 didn't exist on any schematic. The wiring between A112 and A114 was sealed. No bypass, no residual current, nothing. The pod was physically present, but digitally invisible. I left the terminal running a looped check, hoping for a glitch I could blame this on. Something clean, something technical, something human. Instead, I went looking for the black box logs. Each cryopod has one, an internal data recorder, similar to aircraft black boxes, logging vitals, movement, and biofeedback. It's designed to survive fires, floods, or total system failure. More importantly, the logs are analog, hardwired, which meant even if the system forgot pod A113 existed, the black box wouldn't. I grabbed my tools and descended into the lower spine, the narrow maintenance corridor beneath the bays. You can't stand fully upright in the spine. You crawl, duck walk, or scoot along the grated floor past bundled wires, insulated coolant lines, and coils that hiss with sub-zero vapor. Everything smells like Freon and metal shavings. A row of backup black box units line the wall like black, blinking teeth, each one marked with an embossed pod number: A109, A110, A111, A112, gap, A114. There was an empty space where a black box should be. Bracket holes still in the wall, mounting screws left behind, stripped. It hadn't failed. It had been removed. I stayed crouched in the crawl space longer than I should have, staring at that void in the line. My fingers absent-mindedly ran across the grooves in the metal where the missing unit had once been seated. Dust had gathered there. Not much, but enough to mean it had been gone a long time. Months? Years? Back upstairs, I reviewed the hard archive, the ancient beige filing cabinet they insisted be part of every cold site. In case of digital loss, they'd said, paper records, real ink, some dating back to the original client intake files. Most of the entries were typed and stamped, but in the back was a small torn envelope labeled "Retired." Inside was a stack of notes written by previous techs, real penmanship, cursive, half legible and hurried. Most were benign. Pod B023 pressure valve loose again. Don't trust the interface temp, running 1.3 degrees hotter. But one page stood out, short, jagged, written in red ink. Again, do not open A113, even if it screams. Even if it screams? I leaned back, pulse kicking behind my temples. The door chime echoed through the room, the low two-tone ping of the pod wing repressurizing. I hadn't opened anything. I grabbed the tablet, rushed to the hall, turned the corner into pod bay 3, and the overhead lights were on. Bright, white, sterile. Every pod was humming in perfect sync. A cool mist hovered a few inches above the floor, stirred by the temperature difference. But the bay felt warmer than it should have. That difference again, not enough to trigger an alarm, but enough that my body knew something was off before my mind processed it. Pod A113 looked pristine. No frost, no scratches, just perfectly clean glass. Too clean. I tapped the panel. This time it responded. System sync, active. Internal biofeedback, error. Audio sensor log, available. Play. YN. I tapped yes. Static. Then a single inhale, wet, like someone gasping through damaged lungs. Then the unmistakable click of a fingernail tapping glass. Once, twice, and then it looped. The same sequence, again and again. I paused the playback and accessed the admin logs. There was no user, no password, just the label authorized user, echo. My screen blinked, a soft pop in the speaker. Then, through the command tablet, a voice crackled through. If you're hearing this, it's too late. I froze. Don't trust your memory. Don't trust the logs. Don't trust your face in the mirror. Click. Silence. I stared at the screen. The voice didn't come from the network. There had been no uplink. Coldwater's satellite connection only opens once per week, and the next sync wasn't for another 3 days. So how the hell did a message come through? That was when I noticed the timestamp. The message hadn't been received. It had been recorded. By me. 2 days ago. I replayed the message over and over. If you're hearing this, it's too late. My voice, but older, strained, like I'd just run a mile with broken ribs. The tone had something else in it too. Not panic, not urgency, something worse. Resignation. I tried to trace the file origin. Nothing. It didn't appear in the comm logs or emergency beacon registry. It was just there, embedded in the diagnostic software under a folder called Echo Rec, which, by all rights, didn't exist before last night. I checked. I'm methodical like that. I don't make those kinds of mistakes. So how had it gotten there? And why the hell would I record it? Unless I already had. The thought gave me vertigo, like my brain tipped inside my skull and all the pieces slid to one side. I needed answers, not whispers, not frostbitten clues, proof. There was only one place in Coldwater with files not stored in the cloud, not on mainframe logs, and not bound to routine scans. The genetics wing, off limits, sealed. Future expansion is what the binder said, though the door had been welded shut since before I arrived. But now it wasn't. I found the breach at the far end of Pod Bay 5, behind a rusted emergency panel. Someone had sliced through the steel door frame from the inside, jagged edges pulled outward, like whatever was in there hadn't been trying to stay out. It was trying to get back in. The hallway beyond was dark. The motion lights didn't activate. My boots cracked dried ice as I stepped over the threshold. The air smelled wrong. Not rot, not decay. More sterile than that. Like hospitals and ozone. Like copper and ammonia. Like burned data. The walls were lined with broken cryo shells. Not pods. Not the high-tech sarcophagi the clients used. These were crude, medical beds surrounded by IV trees and repurposed gel vats. Several had splintered restraints, and one, God help me, still held a tooth. Human. Cracked at the root. It hadn't been there long. I passed through 2 more doors. One marked Cognition Sync Lab, the other, Echo Stream Chamber. And that's where I found him. Or me. He was lying on a slab in the center of the room. Pale, mouth slightly parted, eyes glassy but open. The body was maybe 2 days old, maybe less. No autopsy tag. No ID, but I didn't need it. It was me. The same face, same mole under the eye, same thinning patch above the left temple, same scar across the knuckle from a broken gear latch last winter. Same everything. My legs nearly gave out. I stumbled to a stool. The only sound in the room was my breath, tight and shallow, and the soft hum of cooling vents cycling stale air across old regrets. I approached slowly, half expecting the body to sit up. It didn't, but someone had left a tablet next to it. Unlocked. Voice memo log. File. Last echo. I tapped play. If you find this, Carter, if I find this, you need to listen and not panic. You don't have long before the loop starts again. You're a copy. I was the last full version. We were designed to manage Subject A113's environment after the original staff, after the first accident. But we didn't know what he really was, or how deep the corruption went. They thought he was just a glitch, a failed upload. Rich bastard thought he could be more than human. What came out wasn't him. Not anymore. The voice started to stammer, then stop. A sound, scraping, in the background, like someone pacing. The thing in the pod, it remembers, not linearly, not cleanly, but it knows us. And every time we try to destroy the pod or delete the system, the failsafes trigger. You wake up, fresh, blank, memory wiped, another clone with the same name and the same fucking smile, staring into the camera, saying everything is nominal while the walls bleed cold. Silence. Then, you won't believe it at first. None of us do. But if you're hearing this, you've already started to crack. He's awake again. He won't stay inside much longer. Don't open the pod. Click. I sat in silence for a long time after the audio ended. The air seemed thicker. My limbs didn't want to move. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from some internal misfire, like static in my own nervous system. I looked at the corpse again, at myself. My hands itched. The skin on my forearms felt loose, like a glove starting to peel. How many times had this happened? I stood, slow and shaky, and opened the drawer beneath the table. Dozens of tags, each labeled Carter with an ascending number beside it. Carter 1, Carter 2, Carter 3, Carter 38. I was holding tag number 39. I left the genetics wing and sealed it behind me. Not that it mattered. Whatever locked doors used to mean in this place, they didn't anymore. Not with things getting out. The lights in Pod Bay 3 were flickering now. Not random flickers either. A rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat. 1, 2, pause. 1, 2, pause. And with each flash, I saw something inside Pod A113 that wasn't there before. A silhouette, a shift in weight, something pressing harder against the glass from the inside. He's awake again. He won't stay inside much longer. I didn't know what to do. My thoughts were layered, not chaotic, just misaligned, like pages in a book bound out of order. My hands moved like they'd done this before. My boots carried me back to the command center without conscious intent. Somewhere, buried in my synthetic reflexes, this routine was already embedded. I logged in and bypassed the system firewall using the same override code I had sworn didn't exist yesterday. ECHO.ANONYMOUS/ADMIN. It worked. An entire hidden directory unfurled across the screen. Buried files, corrupted video logs, scrambled names. The clients weren't rich people waiting for cures. Not all of them. Some were marked spare, others construct, and then one, redacted and circled in digital red, labeled Subject A113. Classification, Recursive Entity. Vital status, Active, Non-human. I opened the last log. It showed the inside of A113's pod, recorded from a reverse angle deep within the glass, a camera I didn't know existed. The figure inside wasn't just awake, it was staring directly into the lens. Its face was wrong, familiar. Familiar because it had once belonged to someone real. But not anymore. Not after this many cycles. The skin was warped, like heat-melted wax shaped back into something vaguely human. One eye bulged unnaturally wide. The other was sewn shut. The lips twitched, forming a smile that belonged to no living thing. And then it spoke. Not aloud. There was no audio. The lips moved in sync with mine. I reached up and touched my own mouth. It was moving too, word for word, without my permission. I ran. Down the hall, past the frost-slicked floors and humming chambers, past the black box rows and server lights. The air was thick with moisture now, fogged and steaming. Not from failure, but from thawing. Every cryopod was beginning to warm. I reached the override control panel and tried to initiate emergency lockdown. Too late. A cascade of pressure release warnings surged across the screen as steel clamps disengaged one by one. Glass hissed open with agonizing slowness. One pod, then another, then another. They weren't all empty. Some were malformed, genetic slurry in human shapes, twitching in confusion. Others were more complete, naked, blinking against the light, some crawling on all fours with shriveled limbs. I caught a glimpse of one whose face split down the middle like wet paper. But the worst was A113. He stood upright. Not tall, not massive, just centered, like the world bent slightly around him. The lights above him shorted out, one by one. He didn't look at me, not directly. He looked at the space I was going to be, like he already remembered this part. And he smiled. I ran for the upper lift, climbed past the cryo core, and reached the emergency access hatch, the one sealed against the outside. I entered my code. It denied me. Entered the admin override. Nothing. So I kicked it, punched it, pried at it until the panel cracked. Behind me, the moans had started, dozens, not in pain, not hunger, just presence, a cold collective hum vibrating through the floor, like a choir of wrongness rising from the deep. Then the door hissed open. I didn't find the surface. I didn't find the sky or the snow or the long-range antenna. What I found was another room, same size, same shape, but no cryopods, just an observation deck with monitors, dozens of them. Each one showed me, in the control center, in the hall, in Pod Bay 3, in the genetics wing, all angles, all perspectives, all looping. The footage started to glitch, showing multiple versions of me, moving in sync, then falling out of step. Some panicked, some calm, some bleeding, some smiling. I turned around. The door had vanished. The walls were seamless now, the floor pulsing faintly beneath my feet, a low vibration rising beneath the soles of my boots. And then, over the PA, crisp, clean, like a voice from heaven, I heard it. Test 42 complete, resetting simulation. I screamed, but no one came. If you're still breathing, go ahead and like the video. Subscribe if you dare. There are plenty more nightmares waiting for you. And whatever you do, don't forget to ring the bell. It's the only way you'll hear the warnings in time.